What's up, guys? So I wasn't sure if that sounded normal to you because it doesn't sound normal when I play that video for me. So, right? Thank you. We worked hard on it. By we, I mean the person we paid to do it. But they did a great job. It's pretty cool. Um, anyways, welcome to our first Twitch stream or YouTube stream, depending where you're watching. We got some folks on YouTube, we got some folks on Twitch. So this is pretty cool. I don't know what I'm doing, but we're gonna figure it out. So today I figured for our first Twitch stream, I always get asked like once a week at least about books that people ask, what they should read. So what I wanted to do is go through a handful of books, 10 specifically, and maybe a bonus one that I think are really helpful. And some of them are based on my location. Some are based on my own personal interests and where my lack of knowledge exists. So that's a bit of why the book choices are what they are. But before we get into that, the whole plan of the Twitch channel is to do monthly videos where what we're going to do is bring on guests that can do a lot of hands-on stuff that doesn't really translate well into podcasts. Um, so the idea essentially is we can bring some different folks on that have skills that I don't have to talk about stuff that I can't talk about. And hopefully, people that watch can come away with some really cool stuff that they can do. So, right now, we are looking like we're going to be having a guest on next month to talk about low budget DIY mushroom production. So, for folks that want to learn about mushrooms, I don't know a ton. So, this is a really cool way that we're going to be able to get some folks to talk about it and answer questions live and kind of walk you through what you want to look for and things like that. And I can't even go that much more into detail because I don't know. Um, so that's kind of the idea. We're gonna have different folks doing different stuff. Some agriculture. Um, we have some people that are coming on that we've spoken to about non-ag type stuff. So like basic emergency electrical stuff like that. Anything that's a skill, pretty much, is kind of the general idea, and that's kind of what we're going to be going for. So also, I saw a comment about the the wine cave. It's not actually a wine cave. There's just a wine rack, singular, right there, and it's mostly actually beer. It's not even wine. I think there's like two wine bottles. Let me see if we can get this guy over here. Oh wow, it's kind of cool to see it from a different angle. So yeah, that is our wine rack. We've got books. We have books stacked everywhere in this house. So other illicit things that are legal in the state I live in. So that's what I will say about that. More books and so on. Oh, and the microphone. So that is that. So let's get going, I guess. So first book I wanted to talk about is very location specific. India, New England before the Mayflower, Howard Russell. It's a fantastic book. It's all firsthand accounts of when people showed up on colonized land. So it's really interesting because it's actually a lot more sober of an analysis of what they saw. Um, it's really interesting because we have like this first history that we learn of like colonization being like Thanksgiving, blah blah blah, like everyone was friends and yada yada yada, and then you grow up and you learn the opposite, which is like colonists showed up and were fucking terrible. And this firsthand account is a little bit different because it's quite I guess you could say it's more like objective. It's just like this is what we saw, this is how they were living, this is what we could tell about their diet and their health and all of that kind of stuff. And honestly, it was actually like it's interesting to see firsthand accounts where they were mostly like in awe of how healthy and how they lived versus kind of the colonist mindset that we associate. So it's a really interesting read, and part of it also talks. It goes like very deep into the land management practices and things like that. So it's really interesting. And because I'm in New England, makes a lot of sense. There's books similar to it across or based in most parts of the country. Um, I can't say every part because I don't know, but that was particularly interesting to me, and I think if somebody lives in the Northeast, it would definitely be worth checking out. It's also like $5 on Amazon, so that makes it a little bit easier. So let me move that. We don't have a ton of room down here, so now I get to play the game of stacking stuff. The second one, and again, this is something that you can kind of take your own version of. Peterson Field Guide of Ecology of Eastern Forests. 10 out of 10. Again, like a $5 book, and it's so dense and thorough and extensively knowledgeable on local biomes, plants, what you should see in those biomes, like the diversity, the succession process in those biomes. It's just like everything from bugs to trees to animals and everything in between. It's like, despite it being like a field guide book, it's like the best thing because it's unbelievable. So yeah, it's and I also feel that you think you can ID plants until you go through one of these books and you're like, I don't know anything. Like I absolutely do not know anything, and I highly recommend it. It's got some images. It's like been read heavily, so it's starting to fall out. But yeah, you look at the different like, especially with like oaks. You think you kind of know, like, so you're like, oh, I can identify like 6 or 8 oaks, but there's like hundreds, and you look through it and you're like, I've never seen that one. I've never seen that one. They're all in my area. Like, how is that possible? So I will probably put in. I don't know if there's like a notes for this, but I can probably dump them someplace into a chat at some point, maybe when we're done, because I don't want to stop while we're talking to put that kind of stuff in. Unless Matt or Elliot, are either of you on here? Yes, no, maybe. Okay, well, if either of you are on, if you could write those in, that'd be great. So let me move that. All right, this one shouldn't be a surprise at all. Tom Wessels, reading the forested landscape. One of our episodes is basically like a chunk of this book. The one that we did on reading landscapes. It's like one of the best books, and I was super hesitant because there's a field guide. So it was like, oh, maybe I just need the field guide, and I picked it up, and it was a little bit overwhelming because I didn't have this book as like a framework for it. So I definitely recommend, even though the other book is much cheaper, unless you already know what you're looking for, you really need this one. So I would 100% recommend it. It's great. It's got some really cool imagery. So like this is one of my personal, like, I'm super into coppicing, so like it's got this really cool graphic about estimating tree size before coppicing, which is a really cool concept. Um, so I definitely would recommend it. It's based in New England, but a lot of it's pretty applicable anywhere. It's about like how different types of trees rot, how you can identify the wind from how a tree blew down, and how that wind plays into like what kind of storm it was, estimating how old the tree was, and then estimating how long ago that tree fell based on a number of different things. So you can look in a landscape and say, like, I know what happened 200 years ago here, which is pretty cool and I think really helpful, especially places like where I live, which was primarily cleared out for agriculture at some point. So you get a little better understanding of what's happened here and what's happened where you live. So obviously it's not all inclusive because it is based in New England, but again, I think it's the only book I know of that's like this, so I would definitely recommend. All right, this one also has been recommended by Crime Pays but Botany Doesn't, and that's actually what led me to go check it out. Botany in a Day is phenomenal. It's a book that I go to all the time because I'm still terrible at understanding like all of the botanical stuff that goes along with plants. It's a pretty cool book because it's obviously super image heavy. I'm not good at this. So in that sense, it's like really helpful. And it's got some pretty good details of the different information in it. This is from Tom Elpel for Matt. You can take a look right there. If I can find the name, where is it? Oh, there it is. So it's a really good book. I definitely recommend it. It definitely helps you understand the relationships between plants a lot better. It gets overwhelming to try to figure this stuff out when you read online. You see a plant and you're like, all right, how is this related to XYZ? You're kind of just trying to memorize facts for facts' sake versus like understanding uh, a framework, which I think helps all the information stick better. And that's been kind of like the framework of the entire podcast is like understanding that. Uh, and this is just a really good book. I think it's like 17 bucks on Amazon right now. Black Friday being what it is, it'll probably go on sale maybe, but it's interesting because it helps you understand and start thinking about what might be edible species if they're in, you know, if they're related to other things. So it's a cool little book. Definitely recommend. And then I've talked about this book about 35 times on the podcast. J. Russell Smith's Tree Crops. Um, and I've talked about it a million times. It's like my favorite book. It's like long winded, meandering conversations about how farmers farm back in the day. Um, and the use of a lot of trees we don't use very often. And if you're in the Discord, then you probably are familiar with this or you've heard people talking about it like daily. He's very big on persimmons, which people were talking about today. It's a great book. I 10 out of 10. If you're interested in tree crops, if you're interested in silvopasture, if you're interested in native species, the Tree Crops from J. Russell Smith is like the book to buy. It's not super cheap. I think if you want to buy a physical copy, it's like 22, 23 bucks typically. Um, that said, you can find it pretty easily online for free, but I've never seen an easy to read copy online for free. So, like, if that matters to you, like if the text is weird, I tend to not read things online, and that's always how I've seen it. So, if you can find it online, it's definitely one worth buying. I prefer to have a physical copy because it's a great book and it's something I go back to a lot. And J. Russell Smith is he's been ignored despite well, not ignored. He was more important than I think he gets a lot of credit for. So it's a really great book. Um, so this one's a fun one that and yes, there is a Discord. If you shoot me a message on Instagram, I can give you the link. So the next book, we actually just released an interview with Steve like an hour ago, and this is a fantastic book. He did a very good job putting this together. Um, it's one of the only books I know that's more of a wide encompassing dialogue about silvopasture and silvopasture alone. I'm not familiar with any other books that do that have been written at least in the last 50 years or at least easily available. So it's a really interesting read. Steve's a really smart guy, teaches a lot on this stuff. He lives it. He's got his farm's been going for 10 years. He knows what he's doing. It's not like somebody that did it 2 years ago and now they're writing a book on it. He's done a lot of stuff on edible. He also has a book about what's it called? Foods, forest foods, or something like that. And it's kind of the flip side of instead of managing the landscape with like silvopasture and that type of stuff, it's more about tending the woods that already exists and taking what you can out of it without really manipulating it. Where silvopasture is manipulating it to bring in livestock and supplement through a bunch of different things. So he talks a bit about mushrooms, tree hay, uh, honey locust and black locust, which, as you guys probably know, are my favorite trees that don't get a lot of attention. He spends a lot of time talking about breeds and stuff like that that I think is really important to, yes, Farming the Woods. It's a great book. That so it's an interesting book that he's got. He does a really good job of kind of outlining like if you are interested in silvopasture, this is like all the stuff that you know you should at least be aware of. Put it that way. And yes, hide your locusts. I'm on the prowl. I'm actually getting a locust tattoo on Friday, so it's getting serious. the relationship's getting pretty serious. And as you can see, my daughter also likes to draw on it or read it because she decided to draw all over it. So the book's always out. So next one, we actually have an interview coming out. I already interviewed him. It's just hasn't been released yet. Oh my god, that'd be awesome. It's a Juggalo Inc. But that I don't know if that's safe or healthy, but I want to do it anyway. Um, so Nigel Palmer wrote this book, The Regenerative Grower's Guide to Garden Amendments. Matt should be familiar with it because I already made him read it once. Um, it's a good segue into modern natural farming, which is like this broad encompassing term that like means like Korean natural farming and Jadam and all that stuff. But it's like a really good idea or book for like basic amendments and understanding like the logic and the methodology behind like manipulating your environment to return nutrients quickly to the soil and specifically the plants you're interested in. So we actually recorded today the Korean Natural Farming 2 episode, and essentially what it is taking local ingredients and then making them bioavailable to plants. And that's what this whole book is about. But instead of just being Korean natural farming or Jadam or any of those things, it's everything, and it's also like he brings in a lot of scientific evidence to back up a lot of the claims that are made, which I think is really helpful and also validating. He also does a little bit of other stuff that is really important about like mineral use and things like that, and is a little bit more pragmatic than I think a lot of the resources that are out there on this kind of stuff. So great book, making Matt earn his paycheck, which is $0. So those letters count. So definitely check it out. I think it's like $20. But we're going to be interviewing him. I think it comes out January 5th, I think. So that's coming. Really good interview. Super nice guy. He actually does a lot of classes online. He spends his own money getting some scientific evidence. So like sending samples in and stuff to get like an analysis of the materials that he's developing, which is really cool because I don't know of anyone else that does that kind of stuff. His foreword's by John Kempf, which I think should say something. So those are like the understanding the forest and thinking about how do you regenerate landscapes. The next 3 books are kind of outside of that scope. So the first one, and it's not even really necessarily a good book, it's just a really all-encompassing book, is The Backyard Homestead. It's like I said, it's who's this written? It's actually got an editor instead of a writer, Carlene Madigan. So see if I can get that close. I'm not good at this camera thing. So it's not necessarily a good or bad book, but it does everything literally from like making a garden plan to growing from seed to canning to making alcohol to making vinegar to making jams, teaching you how to plant, making you helping you prune grapes, uh, potatoes, how to plant and save and store potatoes. Uh, what else is in here? Storing nuts, propagating nuts, uh, drying herbs. Like it's got pretty much everything in it. It doesn't go too deep into anything, but it even has like growing grains, which is like one of those things that if you haven't gotten tired of me harping on the fact that it's not really important to know how to grow a tomato, it's important to know how to grow like calorically dense crops. This is like one of the only books that I've seen that really goes into like how to plant a wheat field and how to harvest wheat, how to store wheat, animals, butchering. Like it covers a little bit of everything. So it's like a good starting point for like a lot of this stuff. If you're like, I've never grown anything, I don't live on a farm, I live in an apartment in a city, like this is a good just learn a little bit of everything. Also available online for free. Um, if you know where to look. Like it's an older book, so it's been around, and there's pretty good qualities of that digital copy. If you need one, I might have one. Um, so I definitely would recommend if you can get it for free, and a lot of this is new, go check it out. It's not a bad book. If you've been doing this for a while, it's all right. Um, so this one might upset a few people, but um, Butchering 101. Yeah, it's super clickbaity title. Um, so this is like a great book. It's Adam Danforth, and yes, I know who wrote the foreword. It's Joel Salatin, which is whatever. But this is, in my opinion, probably the best book on butchering. It's just super thorough, lots of pictures, and it just, I mean, like everything you could imagine about butchering, down to every piece of meat and how it's utilized and all that good stuff. It's super thorough. I mean, it only goes through like 5 different animals, but it's like it's thick. You can see I keep notes all the time because you can always learn and get better. It's not a cheap book. Well, it's not super expensive. It's like 25 bucks, I think. It's been around for a bit. It's really good, solid book. So I definitely recommend it. It gives you a couple different examples of like different butchering styles, so you can get at least exposed to them. Try one, see if you feel comfortable with it, and try something else if that one doesn't make you like you don't like doing it. There's definitely things like I've never really tried doing or heard of people doing for like butchering different types of animals. That I don't know if I will try them, but just knowing that there's alternatives for people that might not feel comfortable doing it one way or another is kind of interesting. So, decent book. Well, good book, just very specialized. I know there's a lot of people that might not find any use in that book because they don't eat meat. And for that, I apologize, but hold on, my books are all falling on me. I'm just going to put these on the floor. How about that? Actually, I'm on the last one anyway. So we're going to do a little rotation. So I understand for like people that don't eat meat, that might not be a super helpful book. But honestly, I think it is actually in some ways more helpful because if there is a time when you do need to butcher things to feed yourself and you've never even like dealt with meat, it's really helpful to have something as that can hold your hand as good as this book can, from someone that's never like slaughtered an animal to completely breaking it down and everything in between. It's a really good book. Um, Last one is pretty related to that one, and that is, here you go, Matt. Another long title: Butchering, Smoking, Curing, Sausage, and Jerky Making. So, like I was just saying, sorry, Matt. It's Philip Hascheider. There you go. So this is another really good book. Not super cheap, but again, we were just talking about like with the one of the perks of that backyard homestead book is that it actually spends the time to go through like more of those staple crop foods. Meat is very much a super dense food that you don't necessarily need it, but if you're growing food, it's like a very easy way, especially if you have tree crops, to store calories and to get high quality protein dense calories, and you don't want to waste any of it. So having different ways to store it is super important, and I think that storage component is indispensable. So I definitely recommend this one too. Again, super thorough, lots of pictures. So if you've never done it before, you don't feel like, oh, I read a paragraph and I don't know what it means. Like I can understand it, logically, but I can't envision it. So for that reason, it's a super good book. The one I was gonna throw into this list was Teaming with Microbes, but I figured I covered enough on the soil biology with the other books. So this is your bonus option for the vegetarians that don't care for my butchering books. Definitely worth checking out. So that is my list of bonus content. We managed to go 28 minutes for me to talk about 10 books. That's pretty impressive. So hopefully you guys found that kind of interesting. Any questions before we wrap it up, I guess? Yes, no, maybe. I'll give you a few seconds to type if you're typing. What's in those jars? Ugh. can't turn these right. There we go. It's legal in my state, so I can say that and show that because technically it's legal. Any books on the southwestern U.S.? There probably are. I just don't know of them very well. I know that there's been some very specific. Are you asking about like indigenous history or for like the comparison to like the Peterson Field Guide? Because I think there is a Peterson Field Guide for the southwestern U.S. They pretty much have a field guide for everywhere. To be honest, I've never paid attention to see what exactly they have for other regions, but I gotta imagine they exist. Um, but oh, agricultural stuff. So, also additionally, there are some really great books specifically on a lot of the indigenous folks in California, which I guess is not quite what you'd be looking for. But that is one area that there's been like a good amount of writing. As if you are interested in more of that historical evidence-based understanding of um, ecology and indigenous management, um, ResearchGate is really great. If you aren't familiar with ResearchGate, you can just go up there and type in whatever you're looking for, and you can pull up papers and skim through them. The only catch is anything that's a year old or more, or a year old or less, will not be available 100%. Um, but many papers, and there are additionally papers that are not available because they're paywalled, but you can go through like Sci-Hub to get around that. If you guys are interested at some point, maybe we'll do a Twitch on how to do research on this kind of stuff if you're interested, and go through that process of how to use Sci-Hub and yada yada yada. As for fermentation, I don't do a lot of. Well, are you talking about alcohol or are you talking about like fermenting for food? Because I do a lot of fermenting for alcohol. Um, as for like lacto fermentation and stuff like that, I don't do a whole lot of that. I'm not a big fan of the flavor profile, and I don't know. I don't really get into that kind of stuff in terms of like fermented foods. It's just not my thing. Um, I'm trying to think of a book. What do I got? No, nothing's coming to mind in terms of books. Biochar, we're going to be doing an episode on, probably not for a while, but I do make biochar and I know a bit about it. It's not as good as people think, but it is still useful. So don't worry too much about that. I don't know why I said that. So we'll cover that and don't stress, I guess, too much about that. If you're like I need to make biochar and apply it right away or something like that, it's marginally effective, but it can be really helpful in soils that really need it. I have soils that really need it, and we'll talk about that, like I said, in an episode at some point in the future. As for the Great Lakes and Rust Belt area, I don't know of too many books. We were just actually in the Discord talking about Sam Thayer. He's based out of that area and does a lot on foraging. And his books on foraging are really great because they're not um, based in like just these are all the foods and this is how you like eat them. But instead, his books are more thorough and deep dives into the different species that he's harvesting and things like that, which I think contextualizes a lot of it that a lot of foraging books don't do a good job of. So that might be of interest to you. His books aren't super cheap because he is a contemporary writer, so they tend to stay above $20 or so. But Sam Thayer is great. I definitely would recommend. Um, Dangy, I already mentioned. Did someone tell him or no? Because we already covered it. The Art of Fermentation, I've heard good things about it. I have not read it. Same with the Fermentation Bible. Those are definitely ones that I've heard about, but I haven't spent much time with. Anything else? Did we cover all the questions? It looks like it, just from skimming through. Cool, guys. So like I said, next month It'll probably be around this time, so I think it's December 19th is the date. That's that Sunday. We'll do the mushroom harvesting, and I'll have to figure out how to bring somebody else on. I think I can. I think I know how. And we can learn some fun stuff about mushrooms. Um, Alcohol making books. There's a bunch of good art of fermentation. I think it's called. Um, no, that's not it. There's a couple good books on beer making, and there's a sorry, I can't remember the names of them. There's one on like ancient meads or something like that that was really good. Um, so there's definitely good books on alcohol. I just can't think of any off the top of my head. Uh, as for the sea salt video that Matt's talking about, that's actually right now only available to our Patreons. It'll probably come out like next week for the general public. Since our patrons are helping fund all of this fun stuff, we like to give them early access to the content that we make. So they've had availability the sea salt harvesting video that we put together. Um, as well as the episode that came out today. They got a week ago, and they also were able to listen to the episode that's coming out on Wednesday. Since I know folks are going to be traveling for the holidays, and maybe in the car for a bit more than usual. So if they want to listen to some more Poor Proles, they have that opportunity. Before we wrap up, I do want to throw a shout out to some of our patrons. We had done way back in the early episodes patron shout outs, and then we just got too many of them. And I think what we're going to end up doing is doing some shout outs in these because why not? They're a little bit less formal. It's a good opportunity to say thanks to the folks that make this work possible. Starting with Sam Gates, one I think our first patron, and still going strong. Dude's a champ. Jerbear 205, Jay, Liz Crossan, Nathan Martinez, Crispy Matt, Aaron H, Tony B, Popsicable, Camille, Eric Vehi, Daniel Teleski, Austin Childers, Edward Dipshit, Teflon Billy, Elliot Brannon, Sasha Jane Bruin, Robert Blobbert, Laurel, Dave Gendel, Moosenstein, Claire, Josh Last, Ross, Sam Falks, Tez Wild, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Tag Dempsey, Ian Wise, Emma, Eno Olson, Tim Byrne, Brett Kassoff, Mike Smith, Adam Robertson, and Zach Hess. So the other folks will get shouted out in future episodes, but y'all are the best. You're the OGs, so you get to be in the first one of these. So thank you guys. This has been fun, and I will see you guys over on the Discord and or other places, I guess, Instagram, whatever. We're also on Twitter. No one seems to know that. I don't really use it that often. So thanks, guys. This has been fantastic, and I will see y'all around. If you have any feedback, let me know.